August 1819, Paris. Crowds are gathering outside the Salon, France's most prestigious art exhibition. Arguments are breaking out, voices rising, someone throws a punch. Inside, viewers stand frozen before a massive painting, 16 feet tall, 23 feet wide. Some people are backing away from it, physically repelled. Others are pushing closer, unable to look away. The painting shows a raft floating in the Atlantic Ocean, bodies piled on top of each other, some dead, some dying, some desperately waving toward a rescue ship barely visible on the horizon. At the bottom left corner, a father cradles his dead son. The young man's skin has turned yellow-green. His limbs hang limp. The father's face is turned away, consumed by grief that's too profound to witness. This isn't a biblical scene. This isn't mythology. This is documentation of real events. Just 3 years earlier, 147 people were abandoned on a makeshift raft off the coast of Africa. For 13 days, they drifted without food or water. When rescue arrived, only 15 remained alive. They had survived by eating the dead, and everyone in Paris knows it. The survivors published their account. The French government tried to suppress it. Now this painting is forcing the public to see exactly what their government tried to hide. Within hours, the arguments outside escalate to violence. The government demands the painting be removed. The artist refuses. To understand why this painting caused such rage, we need to go back to where it began. July 2nd, 1816, off the coast of Senegal, where a French naval frigate was about to run aground and abandon its passengers to the most horrific fate imaginable. July 2nd, 1816, the French naval frigate Méduse strikes a sandbank 40 miles off the coast of Senegal. Just days earlier, passengers had celebrated crossing the equator with an elaborate ceremony. Wealthy travelers dressed as Neptune and sea gods, servants pouring wine, officers laughing. The Méduse was carrying 400 passengers and crew to reclaim France's West African colonies after the Napoleonic Wars. Spirits were high. Now the ship sits grounded on Argand Bank, taking on water. The captain, Hugues de Roy de Chaumarais, had been appointed through political connections rather than merit. He hadn't commanded a ship in 25 years. More experienced officers had warned him about the shallow waters. He'd ignored them. Now his incompetence has run a naval frigate onto a sandbank in the middle of the Atlantic. The situation is assessed. The ship is stuck. Water is flooding the lower decks. They need to abandon ship. But there aren't enough lifeboats for everyone. The Méduse carries 6 boats that can hold maybe 250 people total. There are 400 on board. The captain makes his decision. The wealthy passengers, the officers, and he himself will take the lifeboats. The remaining 147 people, soldiers, sailors, and a few civilians, will be loaded onto a makeshift raft constructed from the ship's spare timbers. The carpenters get to work. The raft they construct measures roughly 20 by 7 meters, about the size of a small apartment. It's nothing more than ship timbers lashed together with rope. No floor, no shelter, no supplies. Just wooden beams forming a crude platform that sits so low in the water, the waves constantly wash over it. 147 people are packed onto it, standing room only. They're told the plan: the lifeboats will tow the raft to shore. It's 40 miles. With a good wind, maybe 2 days. Ropes are attached between the boats and the raft. The convoy begins moving away from the grounded Méduse. Within hours, the ropes are cut, the lifeboats disappear toward the horizon, leaving the raft drifting in the open Atlantic. Some survivors would later claim the ropes broke under the strain. Others insisted they watched officers deliberately saw through them with knives. Either way, 147 people are now stranded with no food, no fresh water, and no way to steer. The raft sits so low that everyone is standing in ankle-deep water. There's nowhere dry. Waves crash over them constantly. Within the first night, 20 people are swept overboard and drowned. Some lose their grip. Some are pushed. In the chaos and darkness, it's impossible to tell. By morning, 127 remain. Day 2, fighting breaks out over space on the raft. In the chaos, more people are pushed into the water. Some drink seawater in desperation and go mad, throwing themselves overboard. Day 3, the stronger passengers begin forcing the weaker ones off the raft to reduce weight. Arguments turn into violence. Men are stabbed. Bodies accumulate. Day 4, a sailor dies from his injuries. By nightfall, his body has been butchered and distributed. Some refuse to participate and continue starving. Others rationalize it as the only path to survival. By day 6, cannibalism has become systematic. When someone dies, their flesh is divided among the living. A few passengers still refuse and die of starvation within days. Day 8, only 60 remain alive. A group of the stronger men decides that the wounded are consuming resources without any hope of recovery. 12 men, too weak to resist, are thrown into the ocean. Day 10, 48 left. Day 11, 27, the raft has formed a brutal hierarchy. The stronger passengers have claimed the center, the slightly elevated portion where water doesn't pool as deep. They defend their position violently. Bodies pile up at the edges, half submerged, waiting to be swept away or consumed. Day 13, July 17th, 1816. A sail appears on the horizon. The brig Argus, part of the original convoy, spots the raft. When rescuers board, they find 15 people still breathing. 5 will die within days from dehydration and injuries. 10 survivors out of 147. When the survivors reach land, the French colonial governor in Senegal attempts to suppress the story. The captain of the Méduse faces a court-martial, but receives only a 3-year sentence, reduced on appeal. He has powerful political connections. The government hopes the incident will be quietly forgotten, but 2 of the survivors refuse to stay silent. Alexandre Corriard, an engineer, and Jean-Baptiste Henri Savigny, the ship's surgeon, begin writing a detailed account of what happened on the raft. Every day, every death, every act of cannibalism, the cowardice of the officers who cut the ropes, the incompetence of the captain who ran the ship aground. In 1817, they publish Narrative of a Voyage to Senegal. The book becomes a sensation. The French public is horrified, not just by the cannibalism though, that's shocking enough, but by what the disaster represents. An incompetent captain appointed through political favoritism. Officers abandoning common soldiers and civilians to save themselves. A government attempting to hide its failures. The Méduse becomes a symbol of everything wrong, with the restored French monarchy after Napoleon's defeat. The class divide, the corruption, the willingness to sacrifice the powerless to protect the powerful. The scandal consumes French newspapers for months. The government is humiliated. And this is when a 27-year-old painter named Théodore Géricault decides he's going to immortalize it. Théodore Géricault is 27 years old when he reads the survivors' account. He's already an accomplished painter, trained in the classical tradition, known for dramatic military scenes. But he wants to create something monumental, something that will establish him as the greatest artist of his generation. The Méduse disaster gives him his subject. He seeks out the 2 authors, Corriard and Savigny, and conducts extensive interviews. He wants every detail: the construction of the raft, the positioning of the bodies, the progression of death over 13 days, the exact moment when the rescue ship appeared on the horizon. He asks them to describe what people look like after days without water, the color of their skin, the hollow of their eyes, how corpses bloated in the salt water, how the living moved among the dead. The survivors are initially reluctant to relive the trauma, but Géricault persists. He explains that he's not interested in creating propaganda or sensationalism. He wants to capture the truth, to create a historical document that cannot be ignored or suppressed. They agree to help him. Géricault rents a large studio and begins his preparation with an obsessive attention to accuracy that will consume the next 8 months of his life. Géricault builds a scale model of the raft in his studio, positioning wax figures to study the composition. He experiments with different arrangements of bodies, different moments in the 13-day ordeal. Should he show the mutiny, the cannibalism, the moment of rescue? He decides on the instant when survivors first spot the Argus on the horizon, the moment between hope and despair, not rescue itself, but the desperate uncertainty of whether they'll be seen. To paint this accurately, he needs to understand death. He visits the Beaujon Hospital in Paris and sketches dying patients. He studies their faces, the exact pallor of skin approaching death, the way eyes lose focus, the slackness of muscles when the body begins to shut down. Then he goes further. Géricault befriends medical students and gains access to the hospital morgue. He studies corpses in various stages of decomposition. He takes detailed notes on the color changes in dead flesh, the yellow-green tint of jaundice, the bloating that occurs in bodies exposed to water. He brings severed limbs back to his studio. Arms, legs. He arranges them on tables to study how light falls on dead flesh, how the skin differs in texture and tone from living bodies. His studio begins to smell of decay. Friends who visit describe the stench as unbearable. Géricault refuses to remove the body parts until he's captured exactly what he needs. For weeks, he paints surrounded by pieces of human corpses, documenting death with scientific precision. The project consumes him completely. Géricault shaves his head to resist the temptation to go out socially. He wants no distractions. He works 18-hour days, barely sleeping, barely eating. Friends report that he becomes withdrawn, haunted by the images he's creating. He becomes fixated on specific figures, the father holding his dead son. Géricault sketches this pose dozens of times. The older man seated, slumped in grief, the young body limp across his lap. He adjusts the angle of the father's turned head, the weight of the son's lifeless arm dangling. This isn't just composition. Géricault is studying grief itself, the physical weight of death, the exact posture of someone who has lost everything. He's not painting a historical event. He's trying to capture the precise moment between hope and despair. The instant when the survivors spot the rescue ship on the horizon, but don't yet know if they've been seen, that split second when everything hangs in balance. The painting will be massive, 16 feet tall by 23 feet wide. It will contain over 20 figures, each requiring the anatomical precision of a master portrait study. He works on it for 8 months straight. His health begins to fail. The smell of decay lingers in his studio. His friends worry he's losing his mind, but Géricault refuses to stop until it's finished. The painting that emerges is unlike anything seen before in French art. At 16 feet tall and 23 feet wide, it dominates any room it occupies. The scale is overwhelming. Figures are rendered nearly life-size, creating the sensation that you're standing at the edge of the raft yourself, watching this moment unfold. The composition forms a pyramid, building from the dead and dying at the bottom left to the desperate living reaching toward the horizon at the top right. Every figure is caught in a different stage between death and hope. The eye is forced to climb upward through layers of human suffering. The color palette is deliberately oppressive. Dark storm clouds dominate the sky, broken only by a thin strip of light on the right where the rescue ship might be. The ocean is a churning mass of green-black water, waves threatening to swallow the raft entirely. There's no escape in this painting, no relief, just bodies and water and sky. But it's the bodies themselves that make the painting unforgettable. Géricault has painted human suffering with a realism that makes viewers physically uncomfortable. These aren't idealized classical figures. They're starved, dehydrated, dying men rendered with anatomical precision, every rib visible, skin stretched tight over bone, flesh turned sickly yellow-green from exposure and death. The painting forces you to see what the French government wanted hidden. At the bottom left, the foundation of the composition, the dead. A father cradles his son's corpse. The young man's skin has turned yellow-green, his face slack, his limbs heavy with death. The father's face is turned away from us, buried in his grief. This is suffering too profound to be witnessed directly. Survivors identified this as a real person. A passenger who held his son's body for days on the raft, refusing to let it be thrown overboard or consumed. Even as others resorted to cannibalism, this father protected his son's remains. Géricault has captured the exact moment before he must finally let go. To the right of the father, a figure sits in absolute despair, head in hands, completely detached from the frantic activity above him. He's given up. He's alive but no longer hoping. His posture suggests he's waiting for death, perhaps even welcoming it. This bottom layer establishes the reality of the raft. Most people here are already dead or dying. The painting doesn't hide this. It forces you to acknowledge it before allowing your eye to climb higher. Moving up the pyramid, we encounter those still alive but barely. Directly to the right of the father and son, a man lies face down across the wooden beams, one arm hanging limply toward the water below. It's unclear if his chest still moves. He's beyond responding. At the bottom left, another figure lies on his side, face turned upward toward the stormy sky. His eyes are open but empty, staring at nothing. His chest barely rises. He's hours from death. At the far right edge of the raft, a third body lies stretched out almost horizontally, half off the platform, skin gone pale yellow-white. Whether he's already dead or in the final moments is impossible to tell. Géricault has painted their skin with a sickly yellow tone, lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Every rib is visible through their flesh. Their bodies have consumed themselves, burning through muscle to stay alive. These are the ones who will die in the next few hours. They've stopped fighting. Their bodies have nothing left. They can only watch as the stronger men above them wave desperately toward the horizon. One figure particularly stands out, an older man, Mediterranean features, reaching out weakly toward the group climbing above him. He wants to join them, to share in their hope, but he lacks the strength. His gesture is heartbreaking, a last attempt at connection before death. These figures create the painting's emotional core. They're conscious enough to know rescue might be coming, but too weak to do anything about it. They can only watch as the stronger men above them wave desperately toward the horizon. The contrast is brutal. Hope exists 10 feet away, but they can't reach it. The middle of the pyramid, those still fighting for survival. Here the composition becomes dynamic. Bodies twist and strain, arms reach upward, faces turn toward the horizon. These men still have strength, and they're using every bit of it to climb toward hope. A black sailor stands at the center of this group, his muscled back toward us, arms raised, supporting those climbing above him. He's become a structural keystone of the composition. The entire pyramid of reaching, desperate humanity builds upward from his position. In 1819 France, depicting a black man as heroic and powerful was a radical choice. Géricault deliberately placed him as the literal foundation of hope, the figure holding everyone else up. The musculature is extraordinary, every muscle defined, every tendon visible under the skin. Around him, other figures clutch at each other, using bodies as leverage to climb higher. There's no dignity here, no noble suffering. It's pure animal desperation. Hands grab at flesh, feet push against faces. Everyone is trying to reach the top of the pyramid to be seen by the rescue ship. The composition creates a sense of frantic movement, despite the figures being frozen in paint. You can feel the scrambling, the desperate energy of men who know this might be their last chance at survival. At the pyramid's peak, the moment of transformation. Two figures stand at the highest point of the raft. One, a black sailor, waves a piece of cloth toward the horizon. His body is fully extended, every muscle engaged in this gesture. The other figure points desperately towards something we can barely see, a tiny speck on the horizon. The rescue ship Argus. Below them, others join the cry. An old man in red cloth turns to look, his face shifting from despair to desperate hope. Another figure shields his eyes, straining to confirm what he's seeing. This is the moment Géricault has chosen, not rescue itself, but the instant of sighting. The survivors don't know yet if the ship has seen them. They're waving frantically, screaming, pouring their last reserves of energy into this moment, knowing that if the Argus passes without spotting them, they're finished. Look closely at their faces. Géricault hasn't painted relief. He's painted something more complex. Desperation mixed with terror, hope contaminated by the knowledge that hope might not be enough. They're balancing on the edge between salvation and death, and they won't know which way they'll fall for several more agonizing minutes. The painting captures that suspended moment, the unbearable tension of not knowing. The painting technique itself is remarkable. Géricault built up the flesh tones in layers, creating depth and translucency that makes the skin appear almost luminous. The dead bodies don't just look pale. They seem to glow faintly, catching light in a way that makes them hover between life and death. This isn't accidental. It's the result of studying actual corpses under different lighting conditions. The contrast between the storm-dark sky and the illuminated bodies creates a theatrical effect. The light source is deliberately ambiguous. Is it the sun breaking through clouds? Something else? The result is that the figures seem lit from within, as if their desperation itself is generating light. The brushwork varies across the canvas. The ocean is rendered with loose, violent strokes. You can feel the water churning, threatening. The sky is smooth and oppressive, pressing down on the scene, but the bodies receive the most attention. Each figure is painted with portraiture-level detail despite the massive scale. Look at the hands. Every hand in this painting tells a story. Clenched fists, grasping fingers, limp, lifeless hands trailing in water. Géricault has given each gesture the same attention he would give to a commissioned portrait. August 1819, the Paris Salon opens its doors. The Salon is the most important art exhibition in Europe. Careers are made and destroyed here. Thousands of paintings compete for attention, hung floor to ceiling in the grand galleries of the Louvre. To succeed at the Salon means recognition, commissions, immortality. Géricault enters his painting under the deliberately vague title Scene of Shipwreck, but everyone knows what it depicts. The painting is hung in a prominent position, impossible to miss. At 16 by 23 feet, it dominates the wall, dwarfing everything around it. When visitors first encounter it, the reaction is immediate and physical. Some step back, overwhelmed by the scale. Others move closer, drawn to the horrific details. Many walk away visibly disturbed, unable to process what they've seen. The art critics are divided. Some praise Géricault's technical mastery, his anatomical precision, his ambitious composition. The sheer audacity of attempting something this massive, this detailed. Others are repulsed. They call it too graphic, too ugly, too political. Classical painting is supposed to elevate, to show humanity at its noblest. This painting shows humanity at its most degraded, starved, desperate, reduced to cannibalism. But within days, the critical debate becomes irrelevant, because the public reaction transcends art criticism entirely. The painting becomes a political flashpoint. Crowds gather outside the Salon. Arguments break out. Supporters of the restored monarchy denounce the painting as propaganda against the government. Critics of the monarchy see it as proof of institutional corruption and incompetence. Fights erupt in the streets. Police are called to maintain order. Why such extreme reactions? Because Géricault hasn't painted a generic shipwreck. He's painted a specific incident that everyone recognizes, an incident that exposed the government's failure to hold powerful people accountable. The captain who abandoned 147 people faced minimal punishment because of his political connections. He served 3 years, reduced on appeal. He never expressed remorse. The painting makes that failure impossible to ignore. It forces viewers to confront what happened, to imagine themselves on that raft, to ask the question, if you were poor, if you were powerless, would you have been abandoned too? The painting strips away the government's carefully crafted narrative. It refuses to let the Maydu's disaster be forgotten or sanitized. Every decomposing body, every starving figure, every desperate gesture is a reminder of what happens when the powerful protect themselves at the expense of everyone else. The government pressures the Salon to remove the painting. Géricault refuses. The controversy only draws larger crowds. The Salon extends its hours to accommodate the masses wanting to see this scandalous work. The painting that was meant to establish Géricault as an artist has become a symbol of class warfare. Géricault never paints anything as ambitious again. The raft of the Medusa exhausts him physically, mentally, financially. He exhibits it in England in 1820, where it draws large crowds but mixed reviews. British critics, not invested in French politics, focus more on the technical achievement than the scandal. He returns to France and attempts other works, but his health is failing. He suffers from chronic pain, likely from a series of riding accidents over the years. He becomes addicted to laudanum to manage it. His behavior grows erratic. Friends describe him as haunted, unable to escape the images he created. On January 26, 1824, Théodore Géricault dies at age 32 from complications of a spinal tumor. He worked on the raft for 8 months. He lived only 5 more years after completing it. The painting is purchased by the Louvre shortly after his death for 6,000 francs. The government that tried to suppress it now owns it. Today, it hangs in the Louvre's Dinan wing. At 16 by 23 feet, it still dominates its gallery space. Museum visitors stand before it, struck silent by the scale and the suffering it depicts. The painting became exactly what Géricault intended, a testament to human endurance and a condemnation of the systems that abandon the powerless. It remains one of the most powerful and disturbing works in the history of Western art. Of the 10 final survivors of the actual raft, most lived quiet lives after their rescue. 2 wrote the account that inspired Géricault. Their names, Alexandre Correard and Jean-Baptiste Henri Savigny, are now remembered primarily because of this painting. The painting outlived the scandal. It outlived the government it criticized. It outlived the artist who sacrificed his health to create it. And it still provokes strong reactions. Not riots anymore, but discomfort. The unsettling recognition of what humans are capable of, both in their capacity for survival and in their willingness to abandon each other. The Raft of the Medusa forces us to confront a question that remains relevant. When crisis comes, who gets saved and who gets left behind?